Have you ever visited someone that lives close to the railroad tracks? And you're sitting there in their living room, and then the train goes by, and it just about blows you off your seat. It feels like that train is coming right through the window. Everything, your fillings included, are being rattled. And you're like, what in the world? And they're like, what? What's the matter? And you're like, the train. And you're like, oh, and they're like, oh, that, yeah, it's funny. I don't even notice it anymore. How is that possible? That you can be that close to that kind of catastrophe in your life and you don't even notice it anymore. But that's kind of how our society, that's how people react to things in our society today. We live in a culture that is starved, literally starved for a sense of deep relationship and value. But what our modern society tells us about relationships is there is nothing transcendent, there is no God, and therefore the only thing that matters is that you feel fulfilled. Now, even as I say that, I suspect there are those that are saying, oh, that train, yeah, I've been so close to it, I kind of forgot that it even existed. It's just kind of part of our life now. This is the way our society has been for so long, and it's become so loud a statement in our society that we sort of don't even recognize it. And in the sort of environment that says there is no God, and therefore no real responsibility outside of yourself except your own fulfillment, you would expect religion to be cast aside. But what has happened in our modern culture is that people are seeking this catharsis. They're looking for something to relieve them of their frustration and pain and irritation in every conversation and in every interaction, because those strong negative emotions still exist in our lives. We don't want them, but they're there. And so as a result, instead of religion going away, we have become a culture that is hyper-religious. Eastern mysticism and cults and the occult are more popular than ever, especially those religious pursuits that say you're valuable. You might even be a goddess and not know it. You're a god in your own right. And this is why we also, as a culture, are very deeply into counseling and therapy and psychology and deep encounters with our true selves, to the point that they become religious experiences in and of themselves. It is all the pursuit of self and self-actualization. It is Maslow's hierarchy configured as a religious pursuit. By the way, if you want to see how we got to that point in our society, how we got so close to the train tracks, you need to read this book. It's The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self by Carl Trueman. Now, this is a book that is great at analyzing this tremendous sociological shift. And make no mistake, it is a tremendous sociological shift that no culture on earth has ever seen before. And so it's giving it to us from a historical perspective, and it is excellent if you want to understand our times and how we got here. It's a very academic work, so you might want to have a dictionary handy when you read it, but it is excellent in terms of your understanding of where we're at, because so often we look at the symptoms and say that's the problem, when in actuality, it's not the problem, it's a symptom of the problem. The problem is that we are interested in this rise of self. We want the self to triumph over all. But from a Christian understanding, all these other things that we see in our culture are just surrogates. Ultimately, all of these pursuits are just surrogates for prayer, for the vacuum that's left in our lives because we do not recognize a transcendent God and we do not have a relationship with that God. And so we're desperately trying to find something, some closeness with something transcendent. What we've gotten used to is living so close to the tracks that we don't even notice it anymore. So how do we get close to God in the midst of this? I'll submit to you that it's prayer. Prayer is the feeding of the spirit, of the soul. Prayer is the conduit for relationship with the divine. Now, I'm not saying that if you pray that you never need to see a counselor. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we are told that we don't need religion, and yet through the back door, we are scrambling for some form of experience that ministers to the whole self, mind, heart, body, spirit. But there is no substitute for prayer when it brings intimacy with the infinite. And maybe that's the problem. Maybe you think there are substitutes for prayer because in your prayer life, you aren't experiencing intimacy with the infinite. See, there is no substitute for prayer. Prayer is the ultimate when it truly does bring you into that experience. That is the true thing that we lack, and that's what we're looking for. Intimacy with an authoritative God. Even if we deny that, it's truly what we're built for and what we miss most. See, Christianity says that we were built for that, and prayer then becomes that catalyst, becomes a pipeline that brings us into that intimacy with God. See, the basis of prayer, its foundational basis, is intimacy. Now, thankfully, Jesus spends a great deal of time in the New Testament teaching and modeling for us how to pray. And what he teaches is that it's not for show. Anyone who prays for show isn't going to find God in that. Pick up with me in verse 5 of Matthew chapter 6, where he says, in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount, he says, when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, that they may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. Now, perhaps you can see it just on its face, the hypocrisy of making prayer the vehicle for acclaim. The whole purpose of prayer is to seek out the infinite authoritative God. Why else would you pray? Well, apparently, you would pray for show. You would pray to make people think that you're great. In other words, what you're doing is you are setting yourself up as the highest being, even in your own prayer life. Look at me and how holy and spiritual I am. And in that last line there on the screen, Jesus says, if that's how you're going to live, if that's how you're going to pray, you're going to get exactly what you seek. Which ought to be a very frightening thing if we understand what he's saying there. See, this is a caution for where our culture is at as well. Our culture seeks human acclaim. That's its highest value. And so if you seek human acclaim, that's the highest reward that you will receive. If you set yourself up as the highest good, then you is all you are ever going to get. It's not going to get any better. But if you seek the mighty God, the Prince of Peace, that's what you find. That's what Jesus promises. So instead of looking spiritual, Jesus says, actually be spiritual. Engage spiritually, heart, mind, body, as we said last week, voice, and today with your spirit, the whole you being all in. And if that's you, then the results are going to be very, very different for you. He says in verse 6, but when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. You see, God doesn't like flashy shows or loud speeches. He's in secret. In fact, he lives as a mystery waiting to be discovered, says Paul in a number of his writings. And so the best way to uncover a mystery is to engage your whole self in the pursuit of it. Bring your body, bring your heart under control together and get alone with God. That, says Jesus, is when you will find him. Make it private. Seek him in an intimate encounter